U.S. war on Venezuela. Stop U.S. aid to Israel. No U.S. war on Venezuela.
This rally has been initiated by the United Front Committee for a Labor Party. We are here organized today to expose and denounce the United States government for its attack on Venezuela, and also to denounce the U.S.-supported genocide in Gaza. The attacks on Venezuela boats by the U.S. Navy are acts of war against the people of Venezuela. This is combined with the fascist Trump government rebuilding the U.S. bases in the colony of Puerto Rico for a staging area for an imminent invasion of Venezuela. They're preparing now to make a direct attack on Venezuela aimed at the overthrow of the Maduro government. This is combined with the U.S. direct military and economic support for Israel's genocide and mass starvation policies in Gaza and the pogroms in the West Bank. This United Front rally is to oppose the attacks in the war on Venezuela and demand that the U.S. withdraw all military bases from Latin and Central America. It's also to support a mass labor action to stop U.S. military support for the genocide in Gaza. These criminal acts and wars are being paid by the massive cutting of healthcare, education, housing, and public services in the United States. The fight against this war is directly connected to defend our services and families here in the United States, and the government shutdown is part of the drive for fascism in the United States. It's also to support labor action, including a national general strike to stop all military and economic aid to Israel by the United States, and a national labor strike to stop the shipment of weapons and all aid. This is a small rally, but there are millions of people around the world that oppose U.S. intervention in Venezuela and are opposing the military-industrial complex that's happening by the U.S., paid for by the U.S. tax dollars. Meanwhile, at home, we have millions of people that are getting kicked out of Medicare and Medicaid, as well as students that are losing their education, as well as deportations of people who, even people who are legal immigrants in the United States. These deportations are criminal acts, as are the raids that have been going on throughout the United States by ICE, and the military occupation of our cities, like they did in Chicago recently with the raids against a whole residential building with military helicopters that landed, and they raided the apartments, and they detained more than 49 people, including children, zip-tied outside, barely dressed. The same tactics that are being used against immigrants and activists and working people here today in the United States have been the same kind of tactics that have been inflicted upon the Palestinians for decades with U.S. taxes. Now we've seen the true face of fascism, and we must act, and we must speak up. There's been professors who've been fired from universities by false claims of anti-Semitism for speaking up against genocide. There have been students expelled and workers throughout the country who have been speaking up. This fascist regime that is taking over the United States, we need to stop this, and the only way we can do it is we affect their economy by doing a general strike. It doesn't matter how small it starts, but it has to start. And already around the country, there's strikes that are going to be happening in healthcare and around the country because of these cuts and overstaffing. People are dying in hospitals, and they're dying in the streets for lack of housing, and we need to stop this once and for all. My name is Elizabeth Milos, and I am a member of UPTE, University of Professional and Technical Employees, a retired member of Communication Workers of America. I was a medical interpreter at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco, one of the largest employers of the state of California that is also in bed with both Democrats and Republicans in inflicting this war against free speech and in firing doctors who speak up on a genocide and in firing and threatening workers for wearing keffiyehs like I was threatened as well. Their main donors happen to be Zionist organizations such as the Helen Diller Foundation, which has been supporting Canary Mission as well as the IDF. And labor must take a stand regarding this. We must break ties with Israel in all ways. I'm going to be inviting Ricardo Ortiz to speak, a Puerto Rican comrade, veteran of the United States, and he will be also speaking about the issues having to do with Venezuela and in Puerto Rico as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, comrades. This war against Venezuela didn't start with Donald Trump. When the Bolivarian movement won the elections in the 90s, almost right immediately, the Clinton administration said that they were going to keep an eye on Venezuela, right from the first moment that President Hugo Chavez was elected. And Venezuela is a country that has done in the past some social projects like literacy, education, medical assistance, good relations with Cuba. But Venezuela is not a communist country. It's a country that has so-called mixed economy. But still, that's not enough for the United States to dislike. And anytime any Latin American or any third world country that does not go along with the US or European Union or Japanese imperialism programs, the imperialist powers, one or the other, will start putting pressure on that country. Then, when the George Bush administration came into power, same things, sanctions against Venezuela, and moving forward all the way up to the Trump administration, which put a bounty of the current president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. And then the Democratic Party president, the decrepit and former president of the United States, Sleepy Joe Biden, he increased that bounty on the head of President Maduro. So these imperialist actions of blockade, trades, military threats are not only with Trump. This is bipartisan, just as it is all imperialist foreign policy. So, in the Caribbean, there has been a long history of U.S. interventions ever since the United States have become an imperialist power. Going back to early 20th century, the United States in 1915 invaded Haiti and occupied it and built a force that would guarantee the economic domination of Haiti. 1916, the invasion of the Dominican Republic. 1934, Nicaragua. 1917, Tampico in Mexico. And all this because of Yankee imperialism establishment as a dominant imperialist power in the hemisphere to compete against its rivals. And after World War II, when the USA emerges as the clear and crystal ruling power among the imperialist countries, the dominion of Latin America, it is the rule now. But as we speak, Yankee imperialism has been weakened by competition of its imperialist rivals, and also what they perceive a threat by China. You know, we can disagree on the nature of China, whatever, but the U.S. wants to pressure China, wants to isolate China, wants to provoke China, and punishes any country that reaches good commercial deals with the People's Republic. So this is what we are dealing right now. There are movements of troops in the U.S. colony of Puerto Rico. We all right here should demand U.S. bases out of Puerto Rico. Right. Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States that was invaded in 1898, and since then the population has been recruited to fight in Yankee imperialist wars while they suffer the cruel criminal regime established right now by the Fiscal Control Board, and that is destroying the country of Puerto Rico. When the Americans came into Puerto Rico, they established multiple naval bases on Puerto Rican soil. At one point, 13% of our soil was occupied by Navy and other armed forces bases. But through the decades, we have been kicking them out. And in 2003, we were able to kick out the hated base that they had, a so-called naval complex in the island of Vieques. And also with that, we also kicked out the Culebra, we kicked out the Vieques Naval Complex. We kicked out in 1975 the Culebra training area, and then the Sabana Grande naval communication stations, because we in Puerto Rico, we don't want the armed forces over there training, destroying the environment, destroying the ecosystem, and threatening our neighbors in the Caribbean. Right now, with these moves that the Trump administration is doing, they have sent Marines to train at a Puerto Rico National Guard training camp called Camp Santiago. Everybody in the country was surprised seeing U.S. Marines coming all out of the sudden after being evicted decades ago. And then there were some landings in a small town called Arroyo. Marines and other military personnel doing landings, disturbing the residents there. And then Trump mobilized 10 F-35 fighter bombers to Muñiz Air Base and to a former naval installation that was closed due to the protests that people had in the 2000s in the town of Ceiba, a former complex called Roosevelt Roads Naval Station. So right there were stationed, combined with Muñiz Air Base, 10 F-35s. And we say, out of these towns, out of Fajardo, out of San Juan, get your planes out. These aircraft have done nothing but bother the people. People don't want these aircrafts on the island. This is dangerous. This puts at risk the civilian population. So I'm gonna close my remarks right now telling you that we have to build a workers' party, an independent socialist workers' party that will get rid with this imperialist capitalist system that is nothing but a system of death, of sickness, of tragedy. So forward and toward a world of socialism. Thank you.
Next, we'd like to invite to speak David Paul from the Venezuela Solidarity Committee.
It's good to see people out here trying to let other people know about the reality of what's going on. This attack and this aggression toward Venezuela is really an aggression toward all people, all countries that are trying for an independent path from the domination of U.S. imperialism. It's a really threat to the entire region, and it's all the media propaganda, all these actions of attacks on Venezuela and all the accusations are just a build-up to war, which we saw before the build-up to the invasion of Iraq. We saw it in the build-up to invasion of Grenada. And it's not just, it's about the oil, but it's also because Venezuela is an example to other countries who are standing up to this bully gangster of U.S. imperialism. Grenada didn't have natural resources, but they were trying a socialist project, a socialist government that had to be squashed. That's one of the other reasons why they want to attack Venezuela. And as what has been said before, this is a pattern over centuries. Not just in the last century, but a couple of centuries, where U.S. wants to dominate the entire region. At that 300-400 years ago, now they want to dominate the entire world. And it's a continuation of the Monroe Doctrine. And they enforce it with all kinds of methods: assassinations, invasions, coups, blockades, and recently sanctions, which many medical reports have shown that they're killing hundreds of thousands of people a year by U.S. sanctions. And they maintain this by lies to the media. The most recent is that Venezuela is the biggest and dangerous producer and path for drugs into the United States. The own government's drug enforcement agency has said that's totally false. Almost 90% of all drugs come from the Pacific coast through Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador, not from Venezuela. But they don't, the media, just lackeys for the administrative narrative, doesn't challenge that. And these little boats that they're blowing up, killing, murdering people against all laws, domestic and international. These little boats could have never even reached the United States. It's like 1,000 miles. They could have never reached the United States. And the most recent farce related to this building narrative of a war against Venezuela is this Maria Machado, the right-wing fascist leader of the right-wing in Venezuela, getting the Nobel Peace Prize yesterday. And it's such a farce. I mean, Obama got it too after bombing and killing thousands in Libya. But this is even crazier. And it just goes that it doesn't mean anything, the Peace Prize. And I think part of it is they're trying to appease the liberal and progressive crowd to show, well, the Peace Prize, we're supporting the Peace Prize person. We must be doing something right. So we have to challenge that, know who they really are. They are fascists. This woman who got the Peace Prize is supporting the genocide in Gaza completely. She asked Netanyahu to do the same with Venezuela. She calls for an invasion of her own country. She calls for military attacks on her own country, continuing sanctions which have killed thousands of her own people. And this is a kind of fascist that our government supports. And really, fascism, I know there's a technical definition of corporate control, but it's been fascist ever since this country was formed. So Venezuela, it's really important to let people know that how important it is to defend Venezuela. They are on the front lines of the global effort to stop fascism. And the message to people is Venezuela is not a threat. Venezuela is the hope for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, for taking the time to come. I know you've been really busy and he's been very active around Venezuela. He was also a member of the people that did an occupation of the Venezuelan embassy when they tried to attack the embassy, and he was there with the other people defending it. Now we'd like to invite another comrade to speak from the Internationalist Youth.
Hi, I'm Will. I'm a supporter of the Revolutionary Internationalist Youth, as well as the Internationalist Group. Reading here a statement from the Internationalist Group. From even before Donald Trump took office on January 20th, it was clear that Venezuela would be in the crosshairs of the new administration, as it had been under Democrats Biden and Obama as well. For decades, U.S. imperialism has been attempting to overthrow the populist nationalist regime in Venezuela and install puppets who will be unconditional lackeys of whoever is in office in Washington. One reason, of course, is that Venezuela has some of the largest proven oil reserves in the world. And going back to the first Persian Gulf War in 1991, U.S. rulers have repeatedly gone to war to keep their hand on the oil spigot, even when, as in the case of Iraq, very little of that oil is imported to the U.S. They want to control it in order to keep their imperialist allies in line. More importantly, the U.S. rulers have wanted to go after Venezuela as a stepping stone to overthrow the worker state in Cuba, which, although it is bureaucratically deformed, is a thorn in the side of Yankee imperialism, which they have been attempting to overthrow ever since 1960, most recently with Gusano-led riots in July 2021. The League for the Fourth International called then, as we have since our inception, to unconditionally defend the Cuban deformed worker state against imperialist threats, blackmail, and attacks, and domestic counter-revolution. We also call to defend Venezuela against imperialist attacks and threats, and against the imperialist-sponsored domestic opposition. We do so without giving any political support to the regime of Nicolás Maduro and his predecessor, Hugo Chavez, and their Bolivarian regime. Despite their popularity among many on the left and their sometimes socialist rhetoric, they are bourgeois nationalists. Venezuela is a capitalist state, and it has even spawned a domestic bourgeois layer connected with that regime. What many former supporters of Chavez who are disappointed in Maduro call the Boli bourgeoisie. Even so, we defend it against U.S. imperialism, which wants to install a puppet semi-colonial regime. The U.S. has repeatedly staged coup attempts against the Bolivarian populists regime in Venezuela from 2002 on. Now, even the New York Times, the House organ of U.S. imperialism, admits the aim of the current military buildup in the Caribbean is to carry out so-called regime change in Venezuela, just as they did in Iraq in 2003. It has nothing to do with fighting drug trafficking, as Trump lyingly claims. The U.S. has an armada of 4 guided missile carriers just off the coast of Venezuela, and a fleet of 25 F-35 stealth bombers standing by in Puerto Rico, the same kind of planes Israel used to bomb Iran in June. It also just carried out a training exercise on one of the islands of paratroopers seizing an airport. That kind of hardware and that kind of training is useless to attack alleged drug-running speedboats. It's for directly attacking Venezuela. It is necessary at this time to prepare to throw back any imperialist attack or uprising by their local puppets with arms in hand. Holding a small leftist protest to verbally distance themselves from Trump and company is not enough. Trade unions and many workers' organizations must prepare to militarily defend Venezuela, or they would be rightly considered to be traitors of the cause of the proletariat. There could be no neutrality against imperialist attacks. There should be a call to form workers' brigades and arm them to throw back any attempt at a coup d'etat, invasion, or US-backed uprising. Just to be clear, the so-called democratic opposition in Venezuela are nothing but imperialist marionettes. Maria Corina Machado, who was just awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, has been on the U.S. payroll for more than a decade. Her voter project is directly financed by the National Endowment for Democracy and the U.S. State Department. The candidate that she ran in the elections last year, Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, served as a bagman, funneling Yankee dollars to Salvadoran death squads, Nicaraguan Contras, and other Central American reactionary paramilitary groups when he was a diplomat in El Salvador in the 1980s, as was revealed in leaked CIA cables. Again, we give no political support to the Bolivarian populist regime, and we oppose Maduro's current effort to replace trade unions with a new movement of workers directly controlled by the state, just as we oppose a similar attempt by Hugo Chavez in the year 2000 to supposedly end the union dictatorship. But we do so in fighting for a revolutionary proletarian leadership of the unions and the workers' movement as a whole against all wings of the capitalist rulers and even some pseudo-leftists who play footsie with the local agents of imperialism. It is necessary to forge a Leninist, Trotskyist, communist party in Venezuela, to fight for a workers' and peasants' government and international socialist revolution. And in the United States, we fight for a revolutionary workers' party against all wings of the imperialist ruling class, denouncing the Democrats who have repeatedly paved the way for Trump with his anti-worker policies and Cold War imperialist warmongering, from Ukraine to Gaza and Iran. And that includes opposing the Democratic Party Socialists of America, whose role is to drag youth, particularly, back into the clutches of the party of imperialist war and racist repression at home. We defend Gaza against the joint U.S.-Israeli genocide, and we call for the workers' movement to mobilize its power to defend immigrants, to defeat the mass deportations of the Trump regime, which are being used as a spearhead for the imposition of a Bonapartist, strong state, police state rule. For workers' mobilizations to smash the imperialist war drive pointing to World War III against Russia and China. Defend Venezuela against imperialist attacks and by its agents rightly known as escualidos. Defend Cuba against imperialism, its gusano agents, and any form of counter-revolution. For world socialist revolution. Thank you.
The United Front Committee for a Labor Party has always maintained that the importance of a united front against imperialism and especially against fascism here at home is one of the only ways that we'll be able to defeat the enemy, which is the enemy of the working class, of immigrants, and if you want to consider the entire world, the United States holds like 800 military bases all over the world. And those military bases apparently don't even protect those countries from attacks by Israel, like Qatar found out. So I would like to invite Kyle from Speak Out to come speak.
Thank you. My name's Kyle, and I work with Speak Out Socialists. We're a revolutionary socialist group active here in the Bay Area who endorsed this demonstration today, and I'm going to share some short remarks. So we endorsed this action because we were watching on with horror as this administration bombs boats in international waters near Venezuela, while positioning military assets near Venezuela, as prior speakers mentioned, in what looks like to be an attempt to attack Venezuela and an attempt at regime change. We know that the real reason for this is U.S. imperialism, and that means both Democrats and Republicans would love nothing more than to remove the Maduro government and install a pro-Western imperialism government who would open up Venezuela's key industries, such as oil, to foreign capital. They want to punish Venezuela for daring to chart an independent course from U.S. imperialism when Hugo Chavez's bourgeois nationalist movement took power with mass popular support and was able to improve the lives of the population for a period of time by exerting greater control of the country's vast oil wealth and reinvesting it back into the country. The crippling sanctions that the U.S. has leveled on Venezuela for the past several years have devastated the country, its economy, and caused a massive migration crisis from Venezuela. The military and economic violence we see this regime conducting on the people of Venezuela is the same violence we see them conducting in their 2-year-long genocide on the people of Palestine and to the working class of this country, as the administration plans to decimate health care and food assistance while unleashing ICE and the National Guard on our streets to abduct our immigrant neighbors and to intimidate us into submission so we'll be too scared to fight back. So in the face of this, we can't lay down and be afraid. We're going to need to keep finding ways to do more. The situation demands it from us. We need to be fighting for mass workers' action in response to this situation. And ultimately, we need to be organizing for revolutionary leadership of the working class, the only force in society that can demand an end and win an end to these escalations on the people of Venezuela, to win an end of weapon shipments to Israel and an end to the genocide, and to begin to take on the Trump regime, the Democratic Party, and the whole capitalist system they both defend. So, as I said, we have a long way to go, and we have to keep finding ways to do more. I think coming here today is a good first step, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak.
So now we're going to have Steve Zeltser communicating by phone. He's representing the United Front Committee for a Labor Party. He couldn't be here today because he had an accident, so let's send him our well wishes as well, okay?
Thank you, Lisa, for allowing me to speak, and I want to give solidarity to our brothers and sisters and comrades at the rally today. I think it's important. It's the first rally on the West Coast against the imminent invasion of Venezuela, and we have to make this the first of many to stop this invasion. The history, and I'm sure many have spoken about the wars on Venezuela, has gone on for decades and over 100 years. The United States government believes that they have the right to take the wealth of Venezuela, the oil, and the wealth and resources of Latin America and Central America belong to the United States. They did this under the Monroe Doctrine, and they are continuing to escalate it. So the U.S. colonialization of Venezuela and Latin America is extensive. And this idea that the United States, U.S. imperialism, has the right to the wealth and resources of these countries has to be opposed by the American working class. And as we also know, there have been many coups that the United States has had in Venezuela to overthrow governments. And the attack on the Maduro government is not new. There was an attack to overthrow him that failed. And not only was it supported by the CIA and the U.S. government, but also by the AFL-CIO Solidarity Center. The AFL-CIO Solidarity Center receives $70 million a year from the U.S. government for international operations, and it's helping to overthrow governments like the Maduro government. United Front of Defense of the Venezuelan people is what we're talking about here. Whether or not you support the Maduro government, we need to unite against U.S. intervention, U.S. imperialism. And I think that the way that we have to do it is through labor strikes, working class action by workers. And this is now combined directly with Palestine. The genocide, the slaughter in Palestine is part and parcel of what's going on around the world. And we have to say that the genocide, which is financed by the United States, is part of ethnic cleansing, it's part of racism, it's part of fascism that the U.S. government is now moving towards and is in. And we have to say that this attack on Palestine has only continued because of the United States. Israel and the Zionists would not be able to operate without the United States and the Democratic Party, which has given billions of dollars to Israel. The leadership of the Democratic Party of Zionists and the AFL-CIO leadership are Zionists. That's why they refuse to condemn Zionism. The AFL-CIO leadership refused to condemn Zionism on that, and they say they're representing workers. So we have to organize internationally, and we have to also look at the record of the AFL-CIO, because the AFL-CIO has supported, for example, the boycott of cargo in Russia, the ILA. They said we've got to support the Ukrainians and did a boycott. What are they doing about Palestine? Nothing. They're allowing weapons to be shipped, and they're continuing military aid for Israel. In fact, the U.S. Congress just passed a budget of nearly $1 billion of military aid. So there's a united front of the Democrats and Republicans to continue this genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza and the West Bank. We have to organize, and also we have to organize against the Histadrut, which is the Israeli trade union federation. It's a corporate trade union federation which supported apartheid in South Africa, and which organized around the world in Guatemala, in Argentina, and many other countries with the CIA to support right-wing thugs and fascists. This history is important that we educate ourselves about and other working people. The key to stop U.S. imperialism is to connect it also with the attack on workers in this country. The destruction of union rights of 700,000 federal workers, the destruction of Medicaid, Medicare for millions of workers, the attack on public education, the fascist attack on teachers, on workers, on journalists who speak out is part and parcel of the path to destroy the working class and bring in a fascist government. Now, we know, and some of you may have mentioned, that the Italians had a massive general strike of workers and youth, and 100,000 in Rome, all throughout Italy. We have to move for a general strike now with the government shutdown against the attack on government workers. The airline workers and the president of the airline flight attendants, Sarah Nelson, previously called for a general strike in the last shutdown. Today in the United States, there's danger in the skies. The air traffic controllers are not being paid. Millions of workers are losing their jobs. We need to unite politically the unions. And in this coming weeks and months, there are going to be major strikes in the Bay Area. 80,000 Kaiser workers are going on strike against union busting, against layoffs and the use of AI. Thousands of Sutter workers are going on strike, and UC workers, UPTE, CWA, and CNA, and other workers. We have to, and AFSCME, which doesn't have a contract. One of the things that the union bureaucracy does not want to do is unite all these strikes. We need a united front of all these workers. They're facing the same bosses at UC, the regents who are appointed by Governor Newsom, and also the bosses who run the HMO system. So politically, one of the reasons that we're in the shape that we're in is we don't have a working class political alternative in this country. The unions continue to spend millions and millions of dollars for the Democrats and, for example, Prop 50. They're not organizing against fascism, attack on ICE, and organizing for mass workers' actions. They're saying, let's fight fascism, Prop 50. This is not going to fight fascism. We have to organize at the ground floor, we have to organize to unite workers, and we have to build a mass working class party that can challenge capitalism and really run this country for working people, not for the billionaires who presently run it. San Francisco is the center of techno-fascism. The people like David Sachs has been brought in to run the government and the digital development using AI to destroy jobs. We in San Francisco, we in the Bay Area have to organize now to defend our lives, to stop the introduction of AI, the destruction of our jobs, and also unite against the attack on Venezuela and the genocide in Palestine. We have the power. Workers in 1934 shut down the city. In 1946, they shut down Oakland. We need to move now for that kind of action. Solidarity, victory to the Venezuelan people. Stop this war on the Venezuelan people. Stop the war on the Palestinian people. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much.
I also think it's appropriate to mention the issue about these so-called blue angels that are going above us. The sound of war. That's the sound of war. How many veterans suffer from PTSD? How many refugees suffer from PTSD from the sound of those blue angels, those fighter jets that the only thing they're good for, as Israel has shown, is to blow up and to shred little babies with our tax dollars. And here we are glorifying them and calling it freedom. It's not freedom. It's oppression. And when we see that more than 2,000 healthcare workers in Palestine and Gaza were killed, more than 10,000 hostages, Palestinian hostages, in Israeli jails. We have different estimates, from 60,000 to 300,000 people dead, because there's still people under the rubble that have not been accounted for. When there's been 240 to 250 journalists, Gaza journalists, who've been killed because Israel and the U.S. has not allowed any international journalist into Gaza, the Gaza journalists had to take it upon themselves to be able to live stream the suffering of their people. Even 9-year-olds had to pick up the baton of journalism to show what was happening to them. There was a new word that came about, a new acronym, WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. There's been more than 1,000 aid workers who've been killed and continuing to do so. So this so-called ceasefire is nothing but a show. Everybody has seen during these past 20 years in Gaza that every time a ceasefire is called, Israel violates a ceasefire. There's been pogroms, and this did not start in October 7th. In 1947, 750,000 Palestinians were driven away together with the help of the US. They were driven away by fire and blood, by bombings of their towns and villages. And this was documented by Israeli Jewish professor Ilan Pappé. So anybody who starts talking about October 7th, I can also mention more recent history in 2018 and 2019, the Great March of Return, where in Gaza there was unarmed protesters trying to reach the fence in order to become free. There was 20 years of an illegal blockade going on against Gaza. So anybody who considers the people in the Warsaw Ghetto as heroes, which I do, we should also consider those who are trying to get out of an illegal siege in Gaza as heroes as well. Because it was an illegal siege by all international standards. By all international standards. Israel was controlling the outside and actually doing calorie counting, deciding how many calories each Gazan would get. And that's been documented by many international agencies. The genocide scholars, international jurists, human rights organizations have calling it a genocide, and it is. And it's being done with our money. So we must stop this. And we need to stop this, and we need to be aware of what our government has been involved in, and our so-called representatives that are saying that even children should be killed. So this ceasefire that's going on, let's hope it's really a ceasefire. But everybody knows that when they're talking about a two-state solution, they're talking about controlling the air above Palestine. Palestine has been reduced to Bantistans, where you have to go through checkpoints in order to get from one place to another. The West Bank is an occupied territory. Everybody knows what a two-state solution means. It's been alive for a long time. They've created those settlements in different places on purpose, in locations to try to prevent Palestine from having any kind of Palestinian state. So the recognition of Palestinian statehood is just a show. So the two-state solution is just a ruse. Why? If we all believe in equal opportunity and equal rights under the law, why not support a one-state solution with equal rights for all and a right of return? Would we accept anything less here in the United States, where we call ourselves the cradle of democracy? The level of hypocrisy is overwhelming. And the Zionism has gone back from a long time. The American Federation of Labor back in the 1920s helped to create the apartheid state in Israel in the 1920s. And the National Endowment for Democracy has been supporting it ever since. As USAID, as the American Institute of Free Labor Development, which became the Solidarity Center, which was also involved in the coup against the Allende government in Chile. So let's talk very clearly about what's going on. It's in Venezuela right now, and that attack has been going on for a long time. And they've been doing embargoes like they did against Iran. And we've had speakers here talking about the need for a united front, the need for a major labor strike, and the need to fight fascism here at home, as well as abroad. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.